Hey, everybody, time for another episode of Investigating a Find. Well, this isn't so much a find. This is more of something I had inherited, I guess is the best way to look at it. And I was always very curious as to what exactly it was. Well, I know what it is. It's a trinket box, right? It's a little lidded trinket box. But, who made it? Who made this cute little piece here? This piece I actually inherited from my mother. She passed away in the early 2000s. Um, and this was in her collection of little trinket boxes, one of the things she used to collect. This is one of the few pieces I kept. I'm not quite sure why. I think it's just because it was different and interesting, and I just held on to it. But for years, I actually wondered what exactly it was. Well, it does have a nice little maker's mark there. So there's a very good first tip off as to we're going to find this. And it did say it was made in Ireland, stamped made in Ireland in the back. Now we can tell just by looking at it. For those of you who don't know, this is a salt glaze. It was a clear kind of glaze that was put over earthenware products. And it's actually something that is quite old in production style, most notably made by German potters. So this is, you can see the drips of the glaze right down in there. And you can see the rough earthenware of this. But I had the darndest time finding out this maker's mark. Now I looked in all my usual places. I looked in my fancy books. I have two fancy little books here. This is one of them. This has helped me out more times than I care to mention. This is a great asset if you don't have this. It talks about silver. It goes through ceramics. It goes through glass makers. It goes through gold, dolls, toys. So it's a very handy little book to have. But my mark is not in this book. Nope, not in this book. Now I have another book that I've used before and showed you all. This is my other one. This is the Potter and Porcelain Guide book. It wasn't in this one either. Why wasn't it in any of these books? Well, very importantly, this is a newer potter. And by newer, I mean 1976 is when this potter actually started. Now, I found this pattern online, but not in this shape. You can find this pattern by this maker, who I will disclose in just a moment, online, and it's usually in pitchers, milk pitchers, or little like syrup jugs, that kind of thing. But I have not seen, or I did not see another one quite like this. I did find one listed on eBay, and it just listed it as a saltware glazed pattern, but no maker. So we go back to the maker's mark here. It's an M. It is an M. That led me to Nicholas Moss. He is an Irish potter, and he did start in 1976. This particular mark is one of his earlier marks right there. It was pre-1985. So this piece was made between 1976 and 1985. So that might be why it's not showing up in some of my older books. Some of my older books are dated in the early 90s maybe. And he's not quite antique or vintage enough to be considered when putting out a book in the 90s to put his mark in. He is currently still making pottery in Kilkenny, Ireland, and his patterns are actually quite popular. He started off as a potter in that time period and does everything by hand and has a bunch of other pottery makers underneath him. So this is one of the very early, and as far as I could see and tell by looking on the internet, this pattern, very scarce pattern to find. So let's find out a little bit more about Nicholas Moss. So here's a look at the potter's mark on my piece. And here is the Mosser mark on a known Mosser piece. Here's an up-close look at the pattern on my piece. And here's a look at the pattern that is known to be attributed to Nicholas Moss. This is as close as I could get to a covered trinket dish. This is actually a butter dish. And here's a look at the Moss factory in Kilkenny, Ireland. And apparently it is a place you can visit on your vacation to Ireland. This is Nicholas Moss's current maker's mark, and you can see the little pattern that's above is actually the pattern that is on my piece. And here's a look at a collection of Nicholas Moss pottery. They're actually quite charming and very country. I really adore all of these pieces. So there you go. It is a very easy potter to look up, but to find this particular pattern made by him, even under retired patterns, has been a little bit of a challenge because I cannot quite find this exact shape listed among his pieces, even though that is definitely his early maker's mark. Now it's stamped and it's much easier to see. It's actually stamped on the back of a lot of his pottery, as you saw, and his pieces are actually quite adorable, especially if you're into that kind of older earthen kind of ware pieces. You can find him online. I will leave the link to his store in the description box below. And I hope this inspires you to take a really good look at other pieces that you might have in your collection that maybe you inherited. Maybe you have one of these, who knows? And I hope that this helped you out. So until next time, everybody, stay swanky and stay classy.